The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. We've been talking about whether college athletes should be compensated for a long time. And on the one hand, there is the obvious reality that you have these large colleges and universities, even some that aren't so large, but financially, sports and athletes are very profitable for them. It helps with alumni donations. It helps with television and advertising contracts in all sorts of different ways. Athletes are very profitable for schools. And yet, on the other hand, college athletes are still students, and legally they cannot be paid in really any way. They can't be paid for playing. They can't get endorsements, and endorsement deals, or whatever the case may be. That is partially changing. The NCAA yesterday decided that they are going to start allowing, in a limited way, college athletes to monetize their likeness, name, and image. Now, this does not mean that they will be able to earn a salary for playing their sport from the school. But the idea here is that it will be a way, starting in January of 2021, it's going to take about 13 months to put this into place, to allow college athletes to, as they say, have the best possible experience, which in some ways apparently means having some more money than they currently have. Particularly given the amount of time that participating in their sport requires. And the details are still going to be figured out. The obvious idea is, well, they can be endorsing things, they can appear in commercials and this type of thing. It's not actually clear, Pat, yet. I mean, those are the details that still need to be sorted out in the next 13 months, but this does appear to be the direction they're going to go.
Yeah, I suppose there's a number of ways that you can benefit off of using your name and your image and your likeness and make money off of that. That doesn't directly have to do with like the institution, the school paying you.
Sure.
So maybe that would be like the next step. I think I'm in support of that too. Like, sure, it's one thing for these students to be able to have jerseys on the market that they can profit off of, or maybe even going on Cameo and making a few $100s off of releasing some sort of promo video, that sort of thing. But I'm also in support of just having the universities pay out these kids. I mean, I think they deserve it.
I actually think it may be cleaner to just have the universities pay them. And the reason why is the following. Under this new system, they would be allowed under some circumstances to earn money from their likeness, name, or image. Fine. The university is not allowed to pay them a salary. That seems to me to open up the door to corruption and things like, listen, we can't pay you. The school could say, we can't pay you, but we will coordinate for you these other deals. And it's sort of like us paying you, but it's not legally like us paying you. And then it becomes a question of, well, how exactly was this deal structured? And is it actually kosher based on the rules that are put in place? It seems to me it would be cleaner to say, you can't earn money from any of this other stuff, but you will now start earning a salary from the school. I'm not actually proposing we do that, Pat, because I actually think that the problems are way bigger than just saying, who do they get the money from? It's part of a much bigger sort of corruption, good old boy status quo problem that we have. But in some ways, it might be cleaner and simpler to say they do get paid by the school, but they can't do this other stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. But by making them allowed to be paid by the school, I think that puts the schools in a tough position. And so the NCAA wouldn't be necessarily all in support of that. Whereas these other things like selling jerseys and like these other ways to profit off of their image and their likeness doesn't necessarily hurt the school. It doesn't mean that the school has to pay them directly. So I think that's why we're seeing a small transition into this. And I'm totally in support of it. I think that these institutions are profiting handsomely off of these kids. You see the coaches making so much money, sometimes millions of dollars a year. And it's off the backs of these students who in some ways aren't really students. Like if you're talking about like the football athletes and the baseball players, sometimes hockey players, basketball players, especially. Sure, they're signed and enrolled in classes, but everyone knows that they're at the university to play the sport. They're not looking into like higher education and hoping to pursue opportunities down the road using these college degrees. Typically, it's just to play the sport itself.
Yes, typically. And of course, there are exceptions to that. And we all have seen interesting stories about athletes who stick around or come back or get graduate degrees. But by and large, what Pat's talking about is true. And at the high level, particularly in Division I and the top sports, it's a full-time job. And, my mom, when my mom teaches at a small liberal arts college now, but she used to teach at a much larger school that had some Division I or Division II teams. And the students, despite their best intentions, the top level athletes, they're just never around. Even if they want to do well, it's very, very difficult. And it is that they are there to play the sport. The school benefits from that. And in some way, they should be compensated, although I understand some of the arguments made against it. We'll now have 13 months to see how they put this together.
Yeah, and a common argument against paying the student athletes is, well, isn't a free ride enough? Like, I mean, this school normally costs $50,000 a year. They're able to go for free. Like, isn't that all well and good? Well, this is still their time that they're sacrificing. Most of these students don't go on to become professional athletes. I mean, a very small percentage. So what are they supposed to do after that? I mean, sure, you did allow them to, go to school for a few years, but if they can't really benefit off of the degree because they weren't taking their classes all that seriously, where are they supposed to go? So they didn't make any money during their entire college career, and then they're not set up for the best position after they graduate.
And it doesn't have to be just that they're not taking classes seriously. Sometimes it's like, listen, you're coming here to do 50 hours a week of sports, and by the way, you can also go to school for free. Okay, well, I'll do that in hours 51 to 70. I mean, the circumstances are not necessarily the most conducive for those top level athletes to be taking it schedule-wise with the serious, in the serious way that someone who's not also spending 40 or 50 hours a week on a sport would be. I'm not blaming anybody, just saying this is the way that it is. There's a taco truck company in the middle of a controversy because they served workers at an immigration detention center in upstate New York, and then they apologized for it, and now they're apologizing again. I'm talking about Buffalo, New York-based Lloyd, who has a bunch of taco trucks. They parked one at the Buffalo Federal Detention Center in Batavia. And last Wednesday, they were available there to serve lunch to the workers. People flipped out, and now they put out an apology letter saying, we're sorry, we made an honest mistake. We got a request to serve lunch at this facility. We used our standard procedure. We use this to make business decisions that we are typically proud of, but in this case, we are not proud of it. We have ties to the immigrant community, to the refugee community in Buffalo. We work with organizations that work with immigrants to help them find employment. We do fundraisers for Buffalo Without Borders. There's no excuse for what we did, and we are changing our policy so that this never happens again. And then things got even crazier. With people saying the apology is bogus. You're only doing this because people went nuts. Otherwise, you don't really care. It's all about money. There's not really an excuse here. Even if you are tied to the immigrant community in these ways, why is it? What's going? That doesn't make sense. And then there was a counter apology wave as well, where I don't know. I don't want to call them right wingers, Pat, because I don't know their political beliefs. But there were a bunch of people who came out and said, you are a taco truck. You make tacos. Why would you ever apologize just for serving lunch to people? There's nothing wrong. People who work at these detention centers need to eat. They deserve to eat. You are discriminating against ICE workers by saying it was a mistake. So in the end, Pat, nobody's happy.
Yeah, this went wrong in every step of the way. And I would imagine that if Lloyd could take it back, they would. They probably would have chosen not to serve lunch at the detention facility in the first place. Then they would have taken back the apology, and then they would have taken back the second apology.
Yes.
This is just like a total PR nightmare here. And I wonder, I mean, I think this really goes to this idea that maybe people and companies shouldn't apologize for anything. I mean, Trump has been very successful with that. He is able to keep his base of supporters on his side all the time, because he never apologizes for things, even when it's obvious that he should. And it seems to really serve him well. And maybe it would serve like companies and other people well, too.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have worked in this particular case. You know, Trump is in a very different situation than this more locally based company where, you know, who knows where else they're contracted to show up with their trucks. And if all those companies say, hey, you know what, this is getting a little too hot for us. We're going to go with something else. We're going to go with, you know, the Thai truck or the Vietnamese truck instead of the Mexican taco truck. It could cause major long-term problems. I agree with you. If I were them, I would have just not shown up to begin with. And I would have said something innocuous about why you can't. We're overbooked. We just don't have the capacity, rather than we don't want to be involved with you politically. And that probably would have been the smartest move. But too little, too late. And at this point, who knows what the long-term impact will be on the business. But you've got people both defending immigrants' rights and defending the rights of ICE workers to have lunch, I guess, who are furious with Lloyd. After everything that's happened, would you go and get a taco at this place?
Yeah, I don't think that would stop me from getting a taco at this place.
Yeah.
I would just hope that they handle their taco production better than they do their PR, because that was just a horrible thing that they did here with this how this all played out.
Yeah.
And they make it seem like it's not a political thing, that they're just trying to sell tacos. But I think they should know that in this day and age, like just about everything's political, especially with Twitter and people getting outraged. Like they probably should have expected this to happen.
Yeah, I would actually just respect them more, and maybe they've since come out with something like this. If instead of just issuing conflicting apologies, we're sorry that we showed up at ICE to serve lunch, and we're sorry that we said it was a mistake to show up and serve lunch to ICE, where they're kind of being wishy-washy based on what I've seen so far. I would respect them more no matter what their decision is if they were just super clear about their political position. And why does a taco truck need to be political? It doesn't, but they stepped in it, and then with multiple apologies, I would be much more respectful of what they're doing if they just said, here's our position, and we know people aren't going to, not everybody's going to like it, but we're not going to do dual conflicting apologies. We'll see if that ultimately is something that they say. The U.S. House of Representatives has voted overwhelmingly in favor of recognizing the mass killing of Armenians by Ottoman Turks during World War I as a genocide, frequently referred to as the Armenian genocide. And this is really a big thing, particularly in the context of U.S.-Turkey relations, which are deteriorating, I think is an understatement, under Donald Trump. And presidential candidate Joe Biden says that this vote is the right decision. It honors the memory of the victims. The Turkish president Erdogan says that the vote is worthless and that it is a huge insult to the Turkish people to have the vote on Turkey's national day. And the controversy, as I understand it, and I don't want to misstate anything, is that generally speaking, it is agreed that hundreds of thousands of Armenians died when the Ottoman Turks deported them in large groups from East Anatolia to the Syrian desert in the time of 1915, 1916. And many died from starvation or disease. And at the same time, many were also killed in what appear to be mass killings. What's disputed is the number, and then that opens up the door to debates as to whether it does or doesn't count as a genocide, because the Association of Genocide Scholars says only if it's more than 1 million does it count as genocide. And that is where, as I understand it, Pat, a lot of the controversy comes from.
Yeah, and I wonder if the intention matters too, because Turkey, they still say today that they weren't trying to kill this Christian minority. They were just trying to relocate them. Well, if you have all these people marching through the desert for, hundreds of millions of miles or whatever it was, you would have to imagine
millions of miles.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sorry.
all the way
Hundreds of miles. Hundreds
they
of miles.
went to the sun and back.
They did. You can expect that people are going to die from starvation, or
Yes.
there are going to be like populations within that group, the elderly, young, that just can't make that journey, and that people are going to die from this. So like if you take out, if you can just imagine that if you carry out an order like this, that many of those people are going to die. Does that matter? Like, does the intention itself matter if you just want to relocate them versus exterminate them?
I mean, listen, I think it matters in figuring out culpability. Does it matter in deciding whether it's technically a genocide? I don't know. And the other thing is, the ranges that are given are Turkey says 300,000 people died. And others give numbers up to 1.5 million. And when you set 1 million as the line between a genocide and not a genocide, it becomes a very sort of logistical argument. I don't even know that it really matters. I mean, if 900,000 people are deliberately killed or killed by known negligence, as you're sort of saying, is that not a genocide? And then if we say it's not, does it mean that it was any less tragic? I mean, there's just so much built up in this over the last 100 years that it is very difficult to disaggregate all these pieces and have a sort of rational conversation, because it is such a horrible thing.
Yeah, and I don't think you in any way undermine other genocides by also calling the Armenian genocide a genocide.
I don't think
so. And
so.
I certainly think it was. I just wonder, too, like, do these formal condemnations do anything?
No.
Like when the House passes a resolution to formally condemn someone or something, some country, is it purely just ceremonial? Is it purely just so that we can feel better about ourselves?
Well, here's what I would say. If there is a problem because of a country or government that refuses to acknowledge that something like this took place, then getting it on the record via some kind of a declaration like this may accomplish something, right? I mean, imagine that we, over 60 years, it turned out that some country would never say that they formally recognize the Holocaust as a genocide of the Jewish people or whatever. That's a problem. And then eventually putting out some kind of declaration affirming that that's what it was, I guess it does something. In this case, the timing of it and the connection to all of the other geopolitics that are going on with Turkey, it seems that it directly can potentially impact relations with particular countries. I don't know that I would say it's good or bad, or that it's not worth doing. If it's a genocide, it's a genocide, and that's we call things what they are. But I don't know that it does much in practice right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we wouldn't see this vote take place if it wasn't for Turkey going into Syria and wiping out parts of the Kurdish population.
Right.
So it seems like it's a little vindictive in that sense. And maybe one can make the argument that you're using the Armenian people as pawns, right, for your own benefit, because you're just doing this now to get back at Turkey for what they did.
Could have done this at any time, yeah. Let me know what you think about this. I know that we actually have a lot of Armenian viewers and listeners at the David Pakman Show. I want to hear from everybody, regardless of your identity. All opinions are welcome, and I want to hear them. We will have a new show and a new bonus show coming up for you tomorrow. Hot and fresh tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.